What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Consensus must avoid players. Thought I'd do this one in a slightly different style than usual. So instead of just picking the top names you guys listed as your must avoid players, I figured I'd mention the names we all know that I also don't like and give, like a 10 or 15 seconds on just the top reasons why. But I wanted to go over some of the other names I saw and give my take on those players as well, just so that we make sure we're talking about as many players as possible. But before we start, of course, have to do the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was from week 5 on which wide receiver led the league in market share of their team's air yards. The answer was Courtland Sutton, and John Jacobs was the first to get that one right. Today's stat: which tight end clocked the highest speed in 2019? So we will start off with the names that I fully agree with. These are the names I bring up all the time as the people I'm avoiding. We're going to start off with Leonard Fournette. Biggest reason, the extreme inefficiency, but also Chris Thompson taking away third down snaps. And then their team having the lowest projected win total. Really, really difficult for running backs to succeed when they're on, bottom 5, bottom 10 offenses. And since we expect that from the Jaguars, it's tough to take Fournette that early. Aaron Jones, not only is he himself facing extreme touchdown regression, but their entire rushing offense is as well. So not only is he likely to score fewer on a per touch basis, the offense as a whole is likely to throw for a higher percentage of their touchdowns than they did last season. Plus they drafted A.J. Dillon. So just a lot of different factors that should make Jones have a lot less value this season. So I think he's going a little bit too early. Courtland Sutton, dude is a beast, but he needs to significantly outperform what he did last season just to pay off his ADP. And I don't see how that's possible when they add in Gordon. They add in Jerry Jeudy in the draft. They add in KJ Hamler. Like, there's a lot of increased weapons in this offense, and it's not like Drew Lock is Patrick Mahomes. And the last player is Devin Singletary. I think Zach Moss is the better running back, but even if you don't think that's true, we got to admit that Zach Moss is better in the receiving game. Like, any metric will indicate Zach Moss is a better receiving back. So when you look at Singletary, it's like low touchdown upside, low receiving upside. Why do you want a player like that? Why do you want a player that needs the backup to get hurt to perform at their ADP? Makes no sense. So those are 4 names that I mention all the time that you guys really did have as your top options as well. Obviously, you watch my videos, so you're going to have similar players as me. But there were a lot of names, and I posted this on Twitter as well. So in Twitter, in the comment section, that you guys also listed that I want to go over. One name that popped up a few times is Josh Jacobs. And your main concern is the reception ceiling, which I agree with, especially them drafting Lynn Bowden. And then some of you are concerned with the recent signing of Jeremy Hill. I want to assure you that that's not something you should worry about. Like, Hill is done. Hill could get like a few snaps if he even makes the team, but don't worry about Hill. Honestly, do not worry about that at all when you're considering drafting Jacobs. The reception ceiling is the one that I do have a genuine concern with. I do want to share with you one quick story. So apparently, Gruden was so mad that Kyler Murray won the Offensive Rookie of the Year, of course, last season over Jacobs, that he vowed to get Jacobs more carries and more receptions this season to prove what a crime, that the voters committed picking Kyler Murray over Jacobs. Now, this could 1,000% just be coach speak. He could be exaggerating. The quote could even be exaggerating what he said. But you got to look at what it is. I mean, Jacobs had 0 third down targets last season, and he only went over 70% of the snaps once. Still finished as a running back 13 in points per game as a rookie. So I get it. It's a concern, the receptions, but that was also a concern last season, and then it came true. He did not have many targets or receptions, didn't actually play that many snaps, running back 13. So you got to look at that and say he's actually being drafted not at his floor, but pretty close to it. And what's the ceiling? Well, the ceiling is that quote's true, and they bring him in on third downs, and he finishes top 5. So I want you to be a little bit careful. If you remember back to the previous mock draft Monday I just did, I got him in the late second round to pair with Christian McCaffrey. I think that's a really nice spot for him. If you can grab McCaffrey, Barkley, Zeke, you get some of these top end running backs, they're going to be awesome, and you can throw in Josh Jacobs with them, you're capturing a lot of upside, and it's less risk because you don't need Jacob. Like, maybe Jacobs doesn't have the receptions and he ends up being like a bust at like running back 15 when you took him at running back 12. That wouldn't even be a bust, but let's say that happens. Wouldn't be the end of the world because you have an elite running back to pair with him, so he doesn't need to get you 20 points a game. So just a thought, but know that he could absolutely just explode this season. Next up, Le'Veon Bell. I've yet to finalize my take on Bell, but as of right now, I agree in avoiding Bell. This team is going to be a dumpster fire. It is typically just a good strategy to avoid awful teams, at least awful offenses. And with their adding LaMichael Pirine, who's good in the receiving game, with them adding Frank Gore, who might be 37, but he always finds a way to just steal a workload, I don't see the upside. It's kind of like what I said with Fournette, although it's an even more of a concern with Bell. You've got backs that could take some goal line, could take some early down. You've got backs that could take some receptions. And where are the touchdowns going to come from? Because this team is not going to score many points. They're not going to be up late, so they're not going to be running the ball. Like, it's just a really bad situation to where there are other players you can draft, not even just at running back, but other positions as well. So I just don't see myself taking Bell in any leagues this season. Some of you also said that you're avoiding the entire organization of Washington and the Chargers. I think that take is a little bit too aggressive. I saw it a lot for Washington and a few places for the Chargers. I understand Washington for the most part. I mean, I know that it's kind of like, the Jets. It's not a good offense, but no one really costs that much in Washington. Like, I like the value of McLaurin. He's not costing you, a third round pick. He's going closer to like the fifth round. Well, that's good value. Geis is going in the range where all of the starting running backs except for Geis are basically already drafted. So you're getting him as one of the last starters. That's a solid value. Steven Sims Jr., if you're in like a 14-team league or in a 12-team league that has a really deep bench, I have no problem taking him in a really late round. So I don't think you need to avoid Washington just because you're not paying that much draft capital for them. Again, I get it if you just want to say, hey, the Jets are terrible, Washington's terrible, I'm avoiding both those teams. Okay, fine. I'm not going to argue with you on that. For the most part, I get the Chargers because while they're obviously not as bad as Washington or the Jets, their players are more expensive, so you're paying more of a premium for them. And given that they have the obvious downgrade at quarterback, going from Phillip Rivers to Tyrod Taylor, we do expect Tyrod to be the quarterback for most of the season. I do get it. I don't think you just can't draft, Allen, Williams, Henry, Eckler. They're still talented players. I would never draft multiple of these guys because I don't think they're going to be a super high scoring offense. So your weekly upside is capped, your floor is lowered, I guess. But I only have one team so far. I did the Scott Fish Bowl, and I did end up taking Mike Williams in the late 14th round. So I think of anyone on this team, I would take Williams late because, one, he's the cheapest of anyone. The late 14th round is not, a high success rate round. You're not expecting to hit on your late 14th round picks. And I think that at that point in the draft, he has enough upside and enough talent to produce at that sort of ADP. Next, I would probably take Eckler. I think that he definitely has a chance to just be the guy. We know that they're probably not going to use him on all early downs, but they're definitely going to use him on all third down situations, and they're probably going to use him a lot on early downs, and he does have a lot of touchdown upside, and their defense is good, and they are still expected to win a lot of games, so I can see drafting Eckler, definitely not targeting anyone on this team, so I agree with you there, but I think if I were to rank the list for how I would draft them, it'd be Williams as a flyer late, Eckler if that whole tier is gone and he's kind of the last one, Keenan Allen, if you hate running back, you hate quarterback and tight end at that spot, and then he's just the top wide receiver, I guess that's when I would take him, but I'm probably not targeting him. And then Hunter Henry, I legitimately just would not draft him. So I guess that's a really good player for this list. Next up, we have David Johnson, and this one surprised me a little bit, but I haven't really gone over him too much, I guess. So I guess it makes a little bit of sense. And there definitely is a divide in the community after what happened last season. You remember there were some people who were really on him, and then obviously he disappointed because he got injured, and then there were other people who were avoiding him, were proven wrong to start the season, but then got bailed out with the injury. So I think he's a really good name to go over because it seems like people are on the extremes. People either love him or hate him. There's very few people who are in the middle. The top reasons you guys listed as to why you don't like him is that, 1, he hasn't been good in a while. 2, Bill O'Brien is just terrible. 3, Deshaun really doesn't throw to his running backs all that much, so that's going to hurt. And then Duke Johnson is still there, kind of tying in to that last one with the reception ceiling. So let's break these down one by one. First up is that he hasn't been good in a while. That's not entirely true. He was the starting running back for Arizona in weeks 1 through 6 last season, and he was the running back 6 in fantasy over that time, ahead of Zeke, Kamara, Derrick Henry. So obviously, yes, he injured his ankle, and so when you look at the end of season numbers, he hasn't been good in a few years. But those are just health concerns. Those aren't talent concerns. He's been good when he's been given the opportunity. So I don't think that one's super true. Next up, Bill O'Brien's terrible. I cannot argue with that. I have nothing that says he's not. But I will say this. Watson has proven that he can overcome O'Brien's just terrible decision-making, and quarterback play matters more. So if we're saying, would you rather have like a good coach and a terrible quarterback, or would you rather have Deshaun Watson, who's a fantastic quarterback with a terrible coach? Just give me the quarterback, right? I mean, Watson is good enough to make up for really bad play calls, and so I don't see that as a huge concern. Big concern for the organization, for the team, but not for fantasy as much. The best case is that Watson doesn't throw that many dump-offs. He only threw a little under 5 targets per game to Hyde and Duke Johnson combined last season. But that would be a bigger concern for me if David Johnson was going in the first or the second round. He's going in like the late 4th to 5th round, which is later than other non-pass catching running backs, right? Like there are non-pass catching running backs we know are not going to have that much of a receiving role going ahead of him. You've got your Derrick Henry, but obviously we know the rushing ceiling is pretty high. But Derrick Henry, Chubb, if you think Jacobs still maintains no third down role, he's going well ahead of him. Carson, we've got Singletary, like these guys who we don't really expect to have a huge role in the receiving game. Well, they're still going ahead of him, so you can't just say, I don't think David Johnson is a good pick because Watson doesn't throw to running backs, when there are other guys who we also know aren't going to have that many receptions going ahead. And, it's not a big deal if he doesn't see the 7 or 8 targets a game we're used to seeing from David Johnson. 4 targets a game is fine. Like if he sees 4 targets per game, we're okay with that. I talk about the Scott Fish Bowl, my one team where I got Mike Williams in the late 14th. Well, I got David Johnson, and I believe it was the late 5th round. So I think that's a good value. I don't know that I would love targeting him as much in the 4th round. I would still do it. Definitely wouldn't really want to take him in the 3rd round. But the 4th round, where he goes sometimes, that's not a terrible value. But plenty of times, you're in a league where everyone is like the people who made these comments. They're saying, hey, he hasn't been good in a while. He gets injured. I'm not drafting him. And he falls into the 5th. Absolutely take him at that point because he's the starting running back. He's a guy that, while Duke Johnson is there, they're paying a bunch of money. He's the 4th highest paid running back in the league this season. They're going to use him. And I know, like I said, Watson doesn't throw that many dump-offs, but David Johnson is an incredible pass-catching back. He's going to line up as a wide receiver plenty of times this season, and so he's going to have a much higher reception ceiling than Carlos Hyde. Carlos Hyde is not a running back that commands targets, so you can't really use that with him. So just wanted to point out, a few things about David Johnson. I do still maintain that he's a good pick at his value. The final player we're going to talk about today is Amari Cooper. And I've actually seen this one a lot over the years, but your top reasoning is boom bust. You just don't want to deal with 50 points one week and 0 points the next week. But then also adding in this season, they drafted CeeDee Lamb, and so we don't know exactly what Lamb's role is going to be. We think he's going to be incredible in the next 2 to 3 years. We can't know exactly when that's going to kind of come to fruition, right? Like, we think he's honestly going to replace Amari Cooper. At least in my eyes, I think Lamb is going to be the alpha on this team in 2 to 3 years, replacing Amari Cooper. But for this season, we can't be sure, especially with the limited offseason. I sort of agree with the boom bust take, but I'll say one thing. He is right next to Calvin Ridley and extremely close to Cooper Kupp in the percentage of games that he has fewer than 10 points. I would say fewer than 10 points is kind of like your bust when we're talking about that boom bust. So if you're also willing to say Calvin Ridley and Cooper Kupp are boom bust players, then I can agree with that take. But I think people look at the standard deviation. I mean, at least maybe people hear about it. He's got the highest standard deviation of any wide receiver in fantasy. And so you look at that and you're like, well, that just means, his production goes like this. And that is true. That's what his production does. But that's more because of the boom. That's more because he has a 40-point ceiling in certain weeks. That's going to increase your standard deviation. It's less about him scoring 1 point as it is him scoring a ton of points. And if we look at last season, that's pretty much the case. I know he has these bad games, but if you exclude, the game against the Jets where he was injured, he only played like 4% of the snaps. He was shut down by the Patriots in one game, which everyone basically that wasn't Devonta Parker was shut down by the Patriots. But then he only had fewer than 12 fantasy points in 4 of the remaining 14 weeks. So that means that he had 12 or more 70% of the time. And so I know these down weeks hurt, but 70% of the time you were getting 12 or more fantasy points. So I don't really love the take that you can't draft him because of that up and down. Most of the time you're getting really good production. And honestly, I think the 30 and 40 point games are going to be significantly more valuable to your team winning you weeks than the negative of getting you 7 points. That's just my take on that. But I think the bigger point is Lamb. Again, I expect the distribution of targets to be Cooper, then Gallup, then Lamb. But Lamb is special, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he got more work than I'm expecting and more work than many other people are expecting as well. So if you're concerned about that, then he is kind of going in a range where it's like, if you don't love the pick, don't make it, because he's going in like the late second to early third round. If he was a 4th round pick, I'd say, listen, guys, it's kind of a slam dunk. He's on an incredible offense. The touchdown upside's there. The weekly upside's there. You've already got 3 players that are probably really good ahead of him. Why not take Amari Cooper? But he goes in the late second to early third round. And when you look at it that way, you say, that's kind of the end of this running back tier we really like. There are plenty of other options at wide receiver. Maybe you're someone who wants to get your Mahomes, your Lamar, Kittle, Kelsey. So there are so many other options. I'm fine with it. If you really don't want to take Cooper, don't take him. Because honestly, I like the value of Gallup in the 7th. I like the value of Lamb in the 10th. So you have other options. Like if you want a piece of this offense and you missed out on Zeke and then you missed out on Cooper, you've got another chance to take Gallup. You've got another chance to take Lamb. And if you miss out on all those, you have a chance to take Jarwin as well. You got plenty of chances to get a piece of this offense. So don't worry about it if you miss out on Cooper. So those are the players that you guys said you're avoiding the most this season. You can always see my updated list along with players I'll be targeting at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? But thanks for watching.